Okay.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our YWCA Facebook Live event. I'm Laura Gomez Horton, Clinical Director of YWCA Greater Austin. For those of you who are unfamiliar, YWCA Greater Austin provides individual, couple, family, and group therapy, school-based services, care coordination, life skills, advocacy, consultation and training, and we maintain a warm line. Our program stems from the intersection of mental health and social justice. We have been in the Central Texas area for 115 years, and our mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and strengthen communities. Thank you for joining us today for our Connect, Heal, Learn speaker series, which are monthly interviews with subject matter experts to expand awareness and begin to move through tough times collectively. These conversations are held online on the second Friday of each month. Today, we are speaking with YWCA Greater Austin's Youth and Women Empowerment Director, Monet Munoz. Being that March is Women's History Month today, we will be discussing feminism and how it has evolved and expanded throughout the years. Welcome, Monet. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm the Youth and Women's Empowerment Director. I've been doing this job for a few months now. I was originally the program director for the youth program, and now we've kind of expanded it on to include the women's empowerment part of it. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, so I'm a border girl, lived there. I did an undergrad and a master's in El Paso in history, focusing on women gender studies in Latin America. And then I did 2 years post-graduate research at the University of Maryland, where I kind of focus on Cold War masculinity and gender identities in Guatemala. So it's kind of my background. And I've been working in the youth sector for about 8 years now, since I started at the YWCA. I'm working mostly in AISD middle and high schools doing behavioral health classes with the kids. And recently we've kind of added an empowerment section to it, to kind of teaching kids how to empower themselves, kind of be more than what they are, what they think they can be. So it's kind of our new initiative we're doing. And we have STEM kind of going on with that too, to empower girls to be involved in the sciences.
Wow, that's a lengthy resume there. So today we're going to be talking about feminism. And one of the things that I was thinking was that throughout the years, the term feminism has meant many things to different people. Mm-hmm. It's been used as a derogatory word, as well as been embraced as an empowered title. Mm-hmm. The term has been experienced as exclusive to certain populations, but also encompassing representation for all. Can you tell us a little bit about what is feminism and how it has changed throughout the years?
Yeah, so I would say the simplest term or definition of feminism, at least to me, is equality. So it's fighting to have equality, not just like a lot of people think feminism means women want to be better than men. And that's not what we want or what feminists want at all. It's we want to have equality amongst the genders, equality amongst the sexes, equality amongst people, to make sure that we're all kind of like an even playing field. And to kind of talk about how feminism has changed over the years, I'm going to tell like a personal story that I have, that I tell people and that a lot of people find really funny. So my fiance now, when he was my boyfriend at the time, I was meeting his parents for the first time. And the only thing they really knew about me was that I identified as a feminist. And I met them, we talked, we hung out kind of in the backyard. It was nice, first time meeting them. And I remember the next day, my boyfriend at the time comes up to me, he's like, so my dad, he kind of told me, he's like, she was really quiet for a feminist. So kind of like, to me, that kind of really struck me like, well, what did he think I was gonna do? And then I started thinking, okay, for him, because he's older, he's in his 80s now. So to him, the idea of feminist was what you knew in the 60s, which was the feminists that were really loud out there, really radical, like the idea of burning a bra, shouting, like that's what he thought I was gonna be. And I don't know how he thought that's what I was gonna be in his backyard when he met me. But so feminism has kind of progressed. When you think of first wave feminism, you're thinking of the right for women to vote. So kind of Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, all of them trying to get women the right to vote, 19th Amendment, all of that. Then you go kind of to the second wave, which starts in the 60s, where you have that more radical idea of feminism, where women are wanting to get equal access to things, wanting to get equal pay, wanting equal representation, wanting to get similar jobs as men, wanting to not have those constraints of the ideas of beauty, of I need to wear makeup to be pretty, or I need to wear a dress to be pretty. They were kind of going against all those ideas of what was seen as gendered woman. So that's kind of the 60s. And you have the third wave of feminism, which is said to have started kind of in the 90s, which was kind of a rebellion to that second wave of feminism, where women started to embrace a little bit more of, I don't have to be so anti-feminine to be seen as a feminist. I can be a feminist and want to wear a dress, or I can be a feminist and want to wear makeup, but I'm still going to stand for all these ideals I think are important of wanting to be equal and be seen as equal. So a lot of times you see a clash between the second and third wave of feminists, in that the second wave feminists think you third wave feminists don't know what you're doing. You're out here gallivanting around, you're wearing your makeup, you care too much about what you look like and who you are, and you don't care about the real issues. Where the third wave feminists are like, well, we don't have to be exactly who you are. We are our own type of people. We're identifying who we are as our own, but we still stand up for all the same ideals that you guys fought for. And then a lot of people argue now that like in 2010-ish, we started entering a fourth wave of feminism. That's kind of, some people say yes, some people say no. But fourth wave kind of was a lot more, you see a lot more of the digital sphere coming in, of people being able to connect digitally through online chat rooms, the online presence in general. We could have more connection. And you kind of see some of the third wave lingering in, of us women, people who identify as feminists, seeing that they don't need to adhere to a certain physical appearance to be considered certain something. Also the idea of feminisms, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later, but that feminism doesn't really have this one monolithic idea of, I'm a feminist, that means this one thing and that's all it's gonna be. It kind of started to expand and grow out and be more encompassing to people. So I'll kind of stop there, as we're gonna go into more of that, another question.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I feel like just letting you go and not ask questions. I mean, you mentioned a lot of different things, and I'm wondering, is there a main idea of feminism that kind of ties all of those different perspectives and generations together?
I would say it's wanting to make sure that people have equal access to things, that we have equal access to, I would say, jobs, equal access to pay, equal access to resources, just having equal access to things, to make sure that it's like that level playing field, and we're not having one person be able to get more because they are a man or because they are a white man as opposed to an African-American man, making sure there's that equality amongst it. And we're seeing everybody as equal is kind of, I would say, the main driving thread. There's more nuances to it, but that would be the one that I would pull out that you can kind of see.
That's interesting, because I know a lot of people would say that they are pro all those things, that they want increased access and they want equality and equity, people doing equity work all the time, but I don't know if they would identify themselves as a feminist, which yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I would say the word feminism is really loaded for a lot of people. And I just think that's because of how the idea of feminism is portrayed in the media, or how people have portrayed it throughout history. So like I told the story with my boyfriend or fiance now's father, his idea of what a feminist was loud, rambunctious, burning bras, like what he thought it was, but it's evolved so much. But people have this preconceived notion of what it means to be a feminist. And a lot of times it's, well, I don't want to be seen as that type of person because I'm not that type of person. Right. But now we have this idea of feminism. So what I see myself as a feminist, but what I consider my feminism is different than, let's say, if you identify as a feminist, your feminism is going to be different, because we all have our own ideas and our own ideals that we strive for. We have the ultimate thing that we want to have equality, but I may be more, let's say, driven, like I see pro-choice being something very important. But then you have feminists now who have come forward and say, I'm a feminist, but I believe pro-life, which is something really controversial within the feminist movement now, of how can you be a feminist but be pro-life? But that's just their version of feminism. Right. And that's how they identify as a feminism. And the way I see it is, if you identify yourself as a feminist, I cannot tell you you're not, because that's not my place to do so. And also in that, the idea of men becoming feminists or men being feminists. Some people will say, well, men can't be a feminist because they're not a man. I mean, because they're a man and they're not a woman. But being a feminist does not, you don't need to have or need to be a woman to be a feminist. It's far more broad now. And it's not so neatly confined into this little box. It's so much more now. And I think people need to break out of what they think feminism is to completely understand it, because it's not what we think of from the 1960s, which I think is what ultimately drives a lot of people's definition of feminism.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's just a word that is loaded, but loaded because of how it's been socially prescribed as loaded. So,
and I would say it's also become stigmatized. And I would say a lot more in more recent years, it's become stigmatized as man hating. Like a feminist means you hate men. And that's far from what feminists or feminism is trying to do. We don't hate men. It's not we want to put men down and bring them like we need to be up here for men to be down here, and that's the only way it's going to work. It's not what is wanted at all. But I think it's conflated to be that, and that's not what it is. And that's really challenging sometimes. And some people don't want to say they're feminist because of things like that exist.
Right. Yeah, which happens with a lot of things when people, marginalized populations, are trying to gain some kind of power or some kind of equity. Other populations see it as, oh, you're taking something from me, which is not true at all. It's actually good for everybody. But yeah, you're right. And then the scare tactics start, and the demonizing of those words start to so people to increase that divisiveness. You've touched on this already, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about what feminism means. I know, from my understanding, there's the different aspects of it. It can be social, it can be political, it can be philosophical. Can you talk a little bit about feminisms?
Yeah, so I would say feminism is something I first heard when I started even in grad school. So it's something that I hadn't even completely understood yet, because you think feminism, feminist, one thing, but feminisms makes it to where it's like, instead of just being one flower, it's a tree. So you have the idea of feminism, but then it branches out into so many different things. So you have like eco-feminists, you have reproductive rights feminists, you have biological feminists. There's just different types of feminists, but that's not just saying that I myself can only be a reproductive rights feminist, but I can take from a bunch of different things, and that is my feminism. But then there are feminisms, and that each person identifies their own way of being a feminist. And I would say you can also bring intersectionality a little bit into that, in that who I am as a person is defined by many different things and not just one thing. So the intersection of where those are, and the layers of complexity of who I am and where I stand within the social spectrum of things is defined by the intersection. So I am a woman, but I am a Latina woman, a Latinx woman. I am cisgendered. I am also heterosexual. So all these things define me. These intersections are what make me a person and what define me on the social strata. And that's going to be different than a person who, let's say, is transgendered, Latinx, female, and lower class. They're going to be on a far different spectrum and have different privileges assigned to them by society because of where they are on that system. So I think feminism goes into that also, on you're fighting for what also you feel is important to you, but also what is affecting you daily. And what affects you daily is encompassed by where your intersections are as an individual and your identity.
Wonderful. I'd like to take us back a little bit, just because I know that, people might have some questions again about the word and what it means. I actually would like to focus a little bit on the feminist movement. Can you talk a little bit about how the movement might have evolved or where it's at?
So I would say it's evolved it's evolved kind of organically by what was seen as important at the time. So like I said, first wave was really focused on women wanting the right to vote. For a long time, men had been seen as making the decisions for everything because they were allowed to vote, and they would vote in people, and those people were making the decisions for society. So women wanted the right to vote, to have their say in what was happening within their society, what laws were being imposed on them by what lawmakers got put in. So they fought for the right to vote, and that was seen as the important issue then. Then you have in the 60s where women are starting to see, you have after World War II, women were in the workplace. Then 1950s are kind of getting pushed back into the home, and women are rebelling against that idea of a woman being homemaker in the home raising the kids. And it's the idea of, I don't have to be that. I'm more than just a mother and a housekeeper at home taking care of everything in the home. I can be out here in the workforce. I can have a 9-to-5 job. I can have kids. I can not have kids. I can be who I want to be, and it does not need to be defined by the idea of the household. So that's what's happening in the 60s. Women want to be more than that. And it's directly associated, I feel, with World War II, in that women were in the workplace and pushed out. And then it's, well, I want to have this, like, we can do this, and you're not letting us do this. And you're pushing us back into a sphere we don't want to be in. So you have women fighting that. But also within the 1960s, or in that feminist movement, you also kind of have splinters of it, right? Where you have the feminist movement. A lot of people think it's privileged white women, they were able to fight. But then you also have breaks off into, you have Latino feminism, Latinx feminism, you have African Americans who are fighting for feminism, and you each have their own ideas of what's needing to be done for their communities. And you also have cooperation amongst those communities, but they're not all necessarily fighting for the same thing. So I would say in the 1960s, it became more diverse, whereas early on for the right to vote, it was more privileged white women who were able to go in there and have this fight. Where in the 1960s, it's a lot more women just in general coming forth to fight because these issues were affecting them daily. And you weren't just having those privileged white women being able to go out there and fight. You had Latino women, African-American women, you had transgender women, you had everybody coming forward wanting to gain access to that equality. And in third wave, we kind of were building up off that groundwork that was made for us in the 1960s. So we had already made all these advancements in the 1960s. And now it's like, okay, we're here, but this isn't where women ultimately need to be. Like, things can be better. So we want to push it to here. And that's where third wave kind of is. But then, like I said earlier, you had that rebelliousness of where second wave feminists were like, we need to look a certain way. We need to have this really radical idea of what it is to be feminine, but we're going to push against all these feminine norms that people are imposed on us, of the beauty standards and all that. Whereas third wave feminism kind of started to take a little bit about that back. Like, I don't have to be this anti-woman, this anti-feminine to be a feminist. So you kind of had that push. But I would say now it's kind of going to, women are not just fighting for women's issues, as we have seen it before. Feminists are fighting for issues for everybody now, where we're taking up the fight, we're helping with the fight with all different types of populations, all different types of people. And feminism is becoming far more inclusive, where anybody can identify as a feminist. It's not just, oh, you're a woman, you can be a feminist. Oh, you're a man, you can't. It's not that anymore. It's becoming a lot more encompassing. So I would say with each wave we see, it's becoming far more encompassing, and the ideas and the things being fought for are becoming bigger and bigger, and they're also becoming more inclusive. So instead of being so narrow, it's kind of growing. And I think that's good. It's a good way for us to go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you said a lot of different interesting things. One of the things that stood out to me, though, is also, you know, how sometimes, I mean, I know that feminism is a label, you know, it's a title, but people are, like I said, they're doing this work, you know, even years ago, generations ago, probably our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, you know, they're fighting, they're luchadoras, they're out there protecting their family, advocating for their kids, advocating for their grandkids, but probably would not have called themselves a feminist, because again, it's a title, it's a label, but they're doing the work, and that's the main piece, is that they're fighting for their rights, they're fighting for equality and equity.
It kind of ties into, I think, back to one time I came home. So like when I first started undergrad, and you're in high school, you don't get exposed to a lot of things, but when you're an undergrad, you're kind of being able to choose what you want. And I came home to my grandma and I said, oh yeah, grandma, I think I'm going to identify as Chicana. And to her, she was like, you don't do that. You can't identify as that. That means something bad. You don't want to, like, that means those women that are out there doing things that you're not supposed to. So it's like this label, but also you need to think of what past generations associate with that.
Yes.
And then think that way, because to me, it didn't resonate like it did with her. With her, it was, you can't do that. So I think it's still similar now, where people can say they're a feminist and then people are like, you can't do that. Do you know what that means? Right. So it's a similar thing.
Yeah. They think it's a club. It's not a club. It's not a club. We're not signing up for anything.
Yeah, my fiance will joke with me sometimes. Like, I'll do something. He's like, I'm going to take your feminist card away. It's his joke that he has. But it's like, yeah, people think like I have a card that makes me a feminist, but it's not like that. It's far more encompassing now.
Yeah. You know, you've talked about the different waves, and which, you know, tend to follow different generations. And I've heard a lot of people say, you know, especially for not the younger generations, but I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, we're in a different environment now. We're in a different place. We're all good now. You know, it's all good. Women are working, women are getting rights. Same thing that I hear with, you know, post-racial culture, which is, you know, which we know is a fallacy. We know neither one is true. We know there's still power and control based in, you know, the white male privileged world. But, you know, based on the people that do say, you know, we're all good right now, do you think that, you know, there's a way to communicate that feminist movement is still very relevant today, or is it not relevant anymore, or does it need to change?
I think it is really relevant. Like we're still always gonna, as long as the patriarchal system that we live in, that is kind of dominated by the male sphere, still exists, feminism is going to need to be important. And as long as the racist racial structures exist, there's still going to be racism. Until we dismantle all those things, which I can't even begin to like give an idea of how we can do that, because that's an incredibly difficult task. But until those are all dismantled, we're still going to need all these things to keep fighting. When you say that, I think about a conversation I had with a friend about 3 years ago, and he's like, oh, things are okay now, right? Women get paid as much as men, and I don't see why people care anymore. Like, you make the same as I do. And I'm like, no. I was like, well, also you need to think we're in different sectors. Like you are working for a tech company, I'm working for a nonprofit. But I was like, if you break down and look in a tech company, you are probably making more than your female counterpart. That's like, it still exists. Women still make less. Like, I forgot, I don't know what it is right now. The last time it was like 80 cents on the dollar for every, like a man makes $1, a woman makes 80 cents of that. That still exists. That's still happening today. But I think people like to think like, oh, well, that's what they fought for all those years ago, so we don't need it. But things like this are still happening. You still have people who will, like, I chose to not have children. People will still tell me like, why don't you want to have kids? Like you need to have kids. That's what you need to do. And like I stop and then I think an important thing to do is have a conversation with them. Like, well, why do you think I need to have kids? Like my happiness for myself is not derived from having children. I want to be able to do all these other things with my life. So I think a big thing that we need to do is just have conversations, and people don't want to necessarily have those conversations and know that sometimes they might be difficult. I know when I first identified as a feminist, like my father and I had clashes with that, because his idea of what a feminist was a man hater. And it was just having to have those conversations with him of, no, like feminism means this and this and this. And I remember having to have the conversation with him about what Planned Parenthood was. Of like, okay, they do all these other things and help women with reproductive health, and they help to have them gain access to things. It's not all about abortion. So it's about having those conversations with people and knowing sometimes they're going to be tough. Sometimes it might be a little hard, but if you're not having those conversations and you're not telling them what's happening, they might never know. So it's important to do that. Because if we don't do that, we're going to kind of get stuck and be stagnant in where we are now, and nobody's going to ever want to learn more. And that's how we end up in really bad situations, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think the relevancy is still true. I mean, you still hear, female actresses fighting for equal pay in the same sitcom shows, the same movies that their male counterparts are paid. You still hear about, the first Latina woman that made it to whatever, or the first African-American woman that made it to whatever. There's still a lot of firsts to be made.
Well, and you're still hearing like, oh, this is the first African-American woman to win this Oscar, or like this is the first female director to win this. And it's like, I hear that, I'm like, how are we now in, like, this is, I think, 2020, 2021, like, how are we at this point? And we're still saying this is the first woman to have done this. Like, how are we there? And then
but that speaks to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that. It speaks to that relevancy that we're not done. It's not like, check it off, we're there. No, we're not there.
Or we're like still even saying like, oh, this is the first transgender person to be voted into office here. It's like, well, how are we at this point in 2022 and we're still saying like, this is the first transgender person to be doing this, or this is the first African, like, that just boggles my mind how we can still say like that, because it shouldn't have to be where these are the first happening right now. So
yeah, I know earlier in our conversation you mentioned about in the beginning it was more based around white women, white middle class, upper middle class women with privilege that were able to participate in the movement, or that were asking for the rights to be heard. I think there's still a lot of people who feel that the feminist movement doesn't quite represent them. And that representation is so important, of course. Can you talk a little bit about people of diverse gender identities, ethnicities, and socioeconomic statuses that may not feel that this movement represents them?
Yeah, so I would say there are a lot of people that feel that way. And I think it's because of how feminism has been defined both by people outside of the movement, but also within the movement. It's so you still have, like, I run into people who identify as feminists and say, oh, he's a man, he says he's a feminist, but he's not. So like we ourselves sometimes have become real inclusive. of like, oh no, we create this barrier of feminist means this, 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 and this. And if you don't check these boxes, you're not a feminist.
Mhm.
So I think we kind of do some of that damage to ourselves in that we create these ideas of what it means to be a feminist, and then that pushes people away. And then I think because it's so diverse, it's also whatever feminist you meet at any time, whoever you're exposed to, that's where you get your idea of what a feminist is. So it's hard. And then feminism can sometimes be seem as exclusionary to like transgender people because, oh, well, you identify a woman, but you're not really a woman. And you've had issues like that come up with certain populations of like, well, you're not really fighting for the same things we are. And it's like, well, if you stop and think about it, yeah, they are. We're all fighting in this together. And I think it's just, we create limitations within our own movement, and that has happened over time. And you see that in so many different movements, right? Like you've seen that with the civil rights movement, where it's become really like, this is what it is, this is what we're doing. You see that like when Latinos are like Cesar Chavez, like he was organizing farm workers, but it was also like, it was this specific type of Latino person, and this is what we were doing. So like we become very defined in what we're doing. And then we forget about the larger picture of, well, there's more to this than just this small thing. So I think we get really segmented and siloed into what we need to do for ourselves. And then we forget that there are other people that also can be included in our fight and can help us in our fight. But sometimes we become encompassed in, well, we need to do what's good for us and fight for ourselves first. And that's where we get to be, or we get to see the bigger problems.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was just talking to somebody about that, about how it's not until an issue touches us or someone we care about that we actually become either vocal or move in a certain direction. But otherwise, it's like, it's over there, it's happening to somebody else. It's not my fight. But it's not, that's not true. It's all our fights.
Exactly.
I want to bring it a little bit closer to home. You've mentioned a couple of personal stories, Monet, and I really would like to just touch a little bit more on that, about what, I've heard your passion. I've seen your passion for women's rights. And thinking about yourself and your life experiences, you've obviously said you identify as a feminist. So what does that mean for you? What does feminism or being a feminist mean to you?
So I think for me, it's never being okay with the status quo, how it is, I guess is the easiest way I can define it. So like knowing that there's a problem there and wanting to fight against it and making sure that things are okay, not just for myself, but for others around me too. To make sure that when I leave, my future generations after me are going to have it easier than I did. So like I have a nephew, and I want to make sure that when I'm not here anymore, I'm not there to be able to teach him or protect him, there's going to be something better for him. There's going to be a world that's better, where he's not having to struggle through the same things that we're struggling through now. Like I do have privilege. Like I'm a Latina woman, but I was able to go to college, and that in itself is a privilege. But making sure that the next generation, it's hopefully not just like anybody can access college, and it's not just a privilege anymore. Like making sure I can fight towards things like that, to where future generations have it a little easier than we had it ourselves. And I think I've just always been a person that really cares about other people. Make sure, like I'm always the one that wants to make sure everybody's okay and everybody's taken care of. And I think that's where this feminist drive comes from. Like I want to make sure that people are taken care of and people are okay, and that we're not like excluding this person over here because they're African American, or excluding this person over here because they're of a lower class. Like I want to make sure we see each other as people, and that we're all kind of equal. We're not all different, I think is where I ultimately want to go. And that's kind of like a real simple explanation of it. But it's also hard because I've never actually sat and thought of like, I'm a feminist, but why? Just because I think I've identified as it for so long that it's kind of like, it's hard to also lose the reason on why I did it in the first place, or why I identified it in the first place, because that happened so long ago for me that it's kind of hard for me to trace that back.
Yeah, well, and again, maybe it's just an imposed label. Maybe it's more about who you are as a person and being compassionate and caring. And like I said, I see a lot of compassionate and caring people, except, you found this word that means something to you, and you've embraced that.
I think what also helped me is I learned about the feminist movement. I was able to identify with people within that movement. Like, oh yeah, I identify with that person, I identify what happened. And that for me pushed me to be able to label myself and call myself a feminist because of that. So like I did that on my own. And like when people ask, like, yeah, I'm a feminist, but I can see how not all people want to go that route, or maybe they don't identify with the people that have been in the movement because it's not them. They don't see themselves in those people. Like I was lucky enough to have like Latinas in the 1960s who were fighting, who I can see and I can identify with and say like, oh, those are like my people. And I like, we could have been on the same page and fighting for the same things at that time, but not everybody has that. So not everybody can identify with somebody, and they might, because of that, not see themselves as a feminist because there's nobody in that movement that represents them. They see.
So where do we go from here? What is the future of feminism?
So I think the future of feminism is going to keep. So I think the way it's kind of been, not bifurcating off, but the way we've kind of, to an extent, we've kind of siloed ourselves off in different ways of like, I'm this type of feminist, I'm this type of feminist. I think we're going to be pushing, and we're going to hopefully go to the area where we kind of start to come together and realize like, we're pushing back, we're going back into what it was kind of in the 1960s, where we all had our own ideas. And this, I need to fight for this because it's for my people. I need to fight for this for my people. Hoping we come to a place where we can come together and realize that we're stronger together than we are apart. Because if we're fighting together, we're going to get more done, and realize that some of our issues overlap with each other. And that is where we can go, because if we're fighting separately, we're not going to get as far as if we fight together. So that's where I'm hoping we go. The political climate's a little bit better now, so things aren't as toxic. I will say during the previous administration, sometimes there were moments where I was scared to say I was a feminist just because of all the ideas of what a feminist was. So I'm hoping from now on, like, I never want to be in that place again where I'm scared to say I'm a feminist, because that shouldn't be what I'm pushed to. But I can remember saying to my fiance somewhere like, right now in this environment, I wouldn't be comfortable saying to somebody I'm a feminist. And it's just because of the toxic nature that was created. So I'm hoping that we learn from that and we never have to be back into that place, that we can grow from that and realize that we don't have to put people like that, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like the toxicity is still there.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it with the current legislation and directives that are being pushed forward, especially in our state, but in other states as well. But you're right, maybe the threat of violence has lessened, although not for everybody, of course.
Exactly.
So it may be a little less scarier to say some of those things.
Yeah, but I'm hoping it's that we can learn from that. So I always had a professor in college who would say, like, as much as history changes, it remains the same.
Absolutely.
So like, it's also like, we need to learn, because we don't want things to remain the same. We need to learn from what's happened and figure out a way to change it, figure out a way to fight against it, or figure out a way to just radicalize and change those things and change those systems and change those institutions.
Oh, Monet, don't get me started on history because we'll spend another hour here. Right? Because again, and I have to say it, people are trying to change history or keep us from having history learned, or, banning books and, changing curriculums to fit their mold or their, what they want people to feel and see.
Which is a scary thought, right? Because I feel like already, like, my education, I didn't learn everything that I feel like I should have learned. And that was when I was in elementary, middle, and high school. Like, I had to learn a lot of the stuff in college when I was able to pick what I wanted to learn. So like, if they're scaling back more than what I feel I learned, like, I don't know what the kids are going to get out of that. And that's just a really scary thought. And then it leaves it up to individual parents to have to teach these things. And it's like, well, then where do we go from here? So it just makes, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it makes me scared for like generations, like my nephews, who's going to be, he just turned 2, he'll be 3 in December. It's like, by the time he gets to school, what's it going to be like? And like, what kind of stuff am I going to do on the back end to be able to help him to be the best individual he can be? Because he might not be getting that in the institutions we send him to. So.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, what we've been talking about today is all connected. It's all interconnected with, what we're currently experiencing. And hopefully people will see how work for equity and feminism is work for access to the right, to correct, honest history,
Exactly.
and honest current situation information.
Yeah. I think what I can, like something I want to leave people with is
Yeah.
don't be scared of the label. Like, yeah, I can say I'm a feminist and I put that label on myself, but don't be scared of feminist, or don't be scared of the label of feminist. You might have the same ideas. Don't be scared of having the same values and ideas as what is labeled feminist just because it's labeled feminist. You don't have to call yourself a feminist, but you can agree with the things we agree with. You can see the things that are being fought for with the feminist movement. Don't be scared of labels, because a lot of times society, like our society likes to put labels on things. We like to have clear defined things of like, okay, you're a feminist, you're Latinx, you're African American. Like we like to have things in boxes because that's how we are taught to best identify things. And I think we need to stop being scared of those labels and stop being scared of labels in general. Like just break apart from them. We don't have to be within these labels. You can be what you want to be, you can believe what you want to be, and you don't necessarily have to have that label attached to it.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Monet, for joining me and sharing your thoughts and experiences.
Thank you.
I would like to remind everyone that if you would like to keep the social justice conversation going or want to get involved to eliminate social injustices, please connect with YWCA Greater Austin. I'd also like to invite you all to our next monthly dialogues on issues of racism and discrimination on Friday, March 25th, 2022. And furthermore, if you are hurting from life experiences and would like to set up an appointment, please contact our main line at 512-326-1222. Thank you again, Monet, and I
Thank you.
hope to catch up with you again.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.